Hi there, boys and girls. We are on chapter 16 of our reader called Matthew the Apprentice. And remember, this is going to go along with your skills work today for questions. Matthew, have you finished printing those newspapers? Uncle Abraham asked. Almost, Matthew replied. When you are done, I need you to deliver these sermons to Pastor Keller. He's waiting for them, continued Uncle Abraham. Oh, and when you get back from delivering the sermons, you'll need to make more ink. Matthew nodded his head to let his uncle know that he had heard his instructions. In 1755, Matthew was a printer's apprentice. He was originally from a small village 30 miles north of Philadelphia. Matthew's father was a cooper there. A cooper is a skilled craftsman who knows how to make casks, buckets, barrels, and containers of all shapes and sizes. In the colonies, almost every kind of food and drink was stored in the kinds of containers his father made. Here's an illustration right here of Matthew printing newspapers. When Matthew was little, he had thought that he would one day work with his father. However, his older brother, Jonah, had become their father's apprentice. From the age of 7 until he was 10, Matthew had attended a one-room schoolhouse where he was fortunate enough to have been taught how to read and write. 4 days after his 11th birthday, Matthew's Uncle Abraham had come to visit. During his visit, he had offered Matthew the opportunity to move to Philadelphia and become his apprentice. At first, Matthew had not wanted to leave his family. He had 3 younger sisters he loved dearly, along with his brother Jonah. However, Matthew's parents had explained to him that he would have to learn a skill so that when he grew up, he could support a family. Here's an illustration. Uncle Abraham offered Matthew the opportunity to become his apprentice. Before Uncle Abraham left, Matthew had signed on an apprenticeship agreement that stated that he would faithfully serve his uncle, keep his secrets, and obey all of his lawful commands. For his part, Uncle Abraham had agreed to spend 7 years teaching him the skills he needed to be a successful printer. During that time, he would house, feed, and clothe Matthew. 4 weeks after his uncle's visit, Matthew's father had loaded up their wagon, and they had set off for Philadelphia. An illustration of Matthew signing the apprenticeship agreement. In Philadelphia, Matthew and his father had spent 2 days exploring the city with Uncle Abraham. Then on the 3rd day, his father had bought supplies for his workshop and said goodbye. Matthew had watched his father go until he was out of sight. Though his eyes filled with tears, Matthew willed them not to fall. 4 years had passed since that day. Now Matthew was 15 years old. Matthew had 3 more years to serve as an apprentice. When his 7 years of training were finished, Matthew had become a journeyman. A journeyman was a skilled printer, though not yet a master craftsman. Matthew would spend 3 more years working alongside his uncle, and he would receive payment for his work. When he turned 21 years of age, Matthew hoped to become a master craftsman and open up his own business. It's an illustration of Matthew watching his father leave. Matthew finished printing the last newspaper. Printing newspapers was one of the hardest jobs of all. It could take more than 20 hours to print 1 page. All of the work was done by hand. This included organizing tiny pieces of metal with individual letters or punctuation marks on them into the order in which they had to appear on the printed page. This task was called setting the type. The type was then held firmly in place as an inking pad spread ink over the type. The printing press transferred the carefully arranged words and sentences onto paper. Matthew picked up the bundle of printed sermons and quickly checked to see if he had all of the ingredients needed to make the ink when he returned. Ink was made from tannin, iron sulfate, gum, and water. He was happy to see that Uncle Abraham had stocked up on these supplies. Illustration of Matthew and a freshly printed newspaper. Out on the street, Matthew made his way towards the small wooden church at the end of the avenue. Pastor Keller was the Lutheran minister in charge of this church. As Matthew walked, a small, shaggy brown dog came to keep him company. The dog had appeared several times earlier in the week near the door to their kitchen. Matthew had thrown it some scraps, and now it appeared whenever Matthew did. "Hey, you want to come with me?" Matthew asked as he clicked his fingers. The small dog looked up at Matthew and wagged his tail. Okay then, said Matthew. Let's go. Matthew began to run down the avenue, taking care to hold on tight to his delivery. The small white dog scampered happily after him. Question to think about. Do you think being a printer's apprentice is a good opportunity for Matthew? We have a picture here, illustration. Matthew and his shaggy friend. All right, boys and girls, that is the end of chapter 16. Go right into your skills work, and you're going to answer some questions about this story. Have a great Wednesday.